Pucks with Haggs
is brought to you by PrizePicks.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 177th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening. Thank you for interacting with the show. We love to use your questions on social media that you send to me, that you send to Facebook. All of that stuff, we end up answering those questions in the show, so keep them coming and we'll keep answering the questions. I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal, so check out bostonsportsjournal.com for everything there. And I also do a weekly Q&A with the readers and the subscribers there, and use a lot of those great questions that I get from the readers there and the subscribers on this podcast as well. So keep those coming if you have any burning Bruins questions. And one guy that likes to answer burning Bruins questions is my good friend and colleague, Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Rink Rap is my blog. I link to it on X, Twitter, and Facebook. And I write in the seasonal issues of the Hockey News. And that's pretty much it these days, except for coming on here and visiting my old pal Pete Shepard and going on the radio with him in Florida, etc.
That's right. Mick has his weekly stops where he gets to talk some hockey, and
blah, blah, blah.
We love it, though, Mick. We love you talking about it. You love talking about it. It's a beautiful thing. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right. 9 losses in a row, 4-3 loss to the Washington Capitals. Last couple games have been pretty good efforts. Road effort against the Red Wings where they came up a little short. Similar against the Capitals where they came up a little bit short against a very good Capitals team. The rest of this season, I think the players understand it. I think the media understands it. I think everybody understands that, like, they're going to be outgunned, overmatched talent-wise on a lot of the teams that they're playing, especially a team like the Capitals. And so it's going to be a challenge, I think, at times to summon motivation, to get the energy level where it needs to be, to get all that stuff for them. But at the same time, what you hear is playing for opportunity, playing for jobs, playing for pride, like all of this stuff going on. Basically, they know they're playing out the string here, and this is kind of irrelevant hockey at this point because they're just not going to be able to get back into the playoffs. So the question becomes, Mick, what are you looking at? What are you watching? What are you interested in observing here, both during this losing streak that's happened since the trade deadline, and then, these last, 7 or so games that are left in the regular season where there's really not a lot of gravitas when it comes to a playoff push or making the postseason. Yes, they can play spoiler, I'm sure, at some points, but really this is going to be about guys showing that they want to be part of the long-term picture, guys showing that they're good enough to be part of the long-term picture, the Bruins identifying what they need, which becomes even more difficult when they're missing their 2 best defensemen. It's really hard to diagnose what your team has and who they are when you don't have Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy. But what you're watching, what you have been watching, and sort of early impressions on, who you like, who you want to keep, who you think deserves to stick around.
Well, I think we have to put in another chapter to that of who you're stuck with.
Yeah, so that too, for sure.
So you're working with situations that are not necessarily ideal, but I'm impressed with the work that Joe Sacco and his staff have done in keeping this team playing a competitive, hard brand of hockey. These games, they're trying like hell. They're playing hard. I feel like there's certain guys who have been better in the second half of the season than the first. I would put David Pastrnak in that category, and I almost call him captain when I say it. It's really his team now. And I love the fact that he's not wilting. He's not sulking. He's already got his contract, unlike Morgan Geekie. Yet I feel like he's really been an excellent leader during this time, and where it's really, really hard to not just pack it in and say something hurts and not be in the lineup. And he's just showing up, and he's battling, and he's playing with a lot of passion. And I'm really impressed by that. And I'm impressed, obviously, by Geeky, by Nikita Zadorov second half. And I just feel like the team overall plays a hard brand of hockey. They're really trying to push forward, and they just can't. And because the other team always has more goal scorers than they have like one more mistake in their game than the other team, then they have goals in their lineup. And the opponents who have more to play for and more of their guns in their lineup, they have the ability to capitalize, whether it's a closely checked defensive game or whether it's a wide open kind of affair. Whatever it is, they don't have enough right now. And it's adding up to a string of losses. They were saying 10 days ago that these are all playoff games, and they've been swept twice now. So this is a rough patch. And it reminds me a little bit of the Dave Lewis year, in that it's the last time that the Bruins had garbage time. Excuse me. Yeah. And in that 06-07 season, they finished with just a string of losses. And this is what we're watching right now. And the ping pong balls are, there's a golf ball, but also appropriate. If we're going to use stunts, props. Props is the word. So
Mick is the carrot top of the Bruins media here. He's got the props like a prop comedian.
I'm a no top, but in any case, it's hard to watch from an effort standpoint, watching them try hard and just get beat like a drum every night. Yeah. But I do feel like they're steely, they're resolved to keep competing, and I love that because that's going to matter next year. That will translate. I feel like this is an important time for post-Marchand, for Pasta to take control of that room and make his bid to substantiate his leadership for whatever it is next season, for him to lay it down right now. And I feel like he's done that.
Well, and I think, I'm not so sure Charlie McAvoy is going to come back this season and play. And I think there was also an importance of him showing up on the road and practicing and popping in and at least being a voice and being a presence there from a leadership perspective. I felt like that was purposeful, when he showed up on the road. I felt like there was a reason behind that. It wasn't because they decided it was time for him to join the team and start, skating with them. It was more about like needing his presence because, frankly, they probably didn't like the way things were going and like the direction they were headed in and felt like they needed somebody else that was a leader on this team to be out there as well. And it can't just be one guy. And I think if it turns into only a few guys with not enough, support around them, it becomes a really like a folding, deck of cards, like a folding house of cards kind of thing. And I think they found that to a degree this year. And I think Don Sweeney's kind of admitted as much when we've talked to him. Not enough Shattenkirk, James Van Riemsdyk type veteran presences, not enough of those guys sort of filling in spots here and there that could assist the captains and the alternate captains and the leaders with the letters on their sweaters, with the leadership and with the shouldering that load. And, I put Nick Foligno in that category too. He was another guy like that as well, obviously. But not enough guys like that to help out as well, which you really need in an NHL dressing room. And I think that was, you're right. Pasternak and McAvoy need to be really sort of vocal out there leaders, kind of letting everybody else know the pathway forward and how to play and practice like a Bruin and what the expectation is, especially with so many new guys. I think that's a very important thing. I will say the players on the ice and the players playing out the string, obviously, Zacha, Geeky, Pasternak have been outstanding. Geeky's close to 30 goals now. He's going to get paid. He's going to get a good contract, and he should, based on the improvement that he's had. And especially if he gets to 30, like that's a high level. Once you score 30, you can say you've been a 30 goal scorer in the NHL, and there's some cachet there, and there's some money that comes along with that. And I just like the way he plays too. I think he plays hard. He's a big body, like second and third effort on most things. He's a shooter, which they don't have enough of those guys.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that
goes to the net
to like about him as a player. But beyond that, I mean, I like who's Nadinov. That was another nice play he made to Lettieri last night, kind of redirecting the puck towards him as he was going to the net where he scored the goal. That's like a crafty, smart little play under duress and under fire there and with a guy on him. And he's made some plays like that are very crafty, smart, like good plays. He hunts pucks. He's fast. Like I like him as a player. I think there's something there. I don't know that he's going to be top 6 guy and he's going to put up huge offensive numbers, but I think he's a guy that you can use in some kind of position. And I think he's shown something playing extra minutes more for the Bruins certainly than he did when he was in a 4th line role in Minnesota. And the other guy is Jokiharju. I like him. I think he's solid. I think he's a very good defenseman. Like he's not a top pairing defenseman probably. He is not a guy that's going to be playing 25 minutes a night, but he's one of those guys I think you can pencil into like a 3 or a 4 spot and he can play 20 minutes and he's not going to kill you with mistakes and he's going to make solid plays and he pretty much can do a little bit of everything. And those
solid
kind of
6 foot and 200 pounds, and he was a late first rounder.
Yeah.
I think this kid is he's entering the best years of his career. The Bruins did a great job identifying him. He was good in the 4 Nations for Finland.
But you need a D-man like that or two on every good D-man core. You need a couple of guys like that they're not going to make dazzling plays. They're not going to stand out a lot of the time, but they just make solid plays and they don't make mistakes that kill you. And I think he's been that kind of guy for them.
Especially as Zadorov's partner, I feel like he really calms Zadorov down a little bit, and he really kind of brings out Zadorov's best by kind of counterbalancing the personalities on the ice.
Yep.
And I think Jokiharju is so steady that the Bruins have themselves there a player similar to me that Chicago had with Nicholas Hjalmarsson. I don't know if I would say that he's that good, or Florida came up with Gustav Forsling, who had ECHL history. I mean, that's incredible what a story that guy is. Well, Jokiharju actually does have pedigree as a late first rounder, and he's UFA, and no doubt the talks are already going. The Bruins definitely want to make him a keeper, especially in light of the fact, that Carlo is no longer with them, and they need a right shot behind McAvoy, a credible top 4 right shot behind McAvoy. It's worked out famously for them. It's one of the undersung stories of the deadline of the season for the Bruins is bringing in this guy, and what he can give them is going to be potentially huge. Yeah.
No, I like him. I think he's a keeper, and that was a great trade, sending a 4th round pick to Buffalo for him. It was sort of last minute, I'm sure, or like a fallback plan. Once they traded Carlo, they needed another right shot D to bring in just to fill a hole. But I think they found a guy that could help them. Is acquitting himself nicely. That is the story of a guy that's winning himself a job here, by the way that he's playing and what he's shown. And that's kind of what it's about at this point, like we talked about. So there are some players to watch. There are other players that I'm still not sure on. We've got a question here from mhall3333 on Twitter. You made a point a few podcasts ago about being suspicious about players who were drafted and developed by the Buffalo Sabres. I think you're right. Casey Mittelstadt doesn't look the part of the solution here. Him and Elias Lindholm at 2-3 center next year, ? Hard to be optimistic about that. I continue to be amazed at how little Elias Lindholm brings to each game. Elias Lindholm last night, -3, 1 shot on net. The 1 shot on net was a great pass from Cole Koepke right to the front of the net when he was standing right there, point blank. He can't score on it. Not a good game from him. Just not, he's been, I think, better at times since 4 Nations, but still very disappointing overall. And he still has games like last night where he's just not bringing anything to the table. Do we see Casey Mittelstadt and Elias Lindholm as a 2nd and 3rd line centers on this team next year? I mean, Mittelstadt has been okay at times, but and he's definitely got some skill, and he makes some plays sometimes, especially in the power play, that make you take note. but I don't think he shows it consistently enough to really merit being a second line center in the NHL for the Boston Bruins. Your thoughts just on his question here and his observations?
Don Sweeney's done a fabulous job at identifying needles in the NHL haystack and then elevating those players, acquiring them and identifying them, acquiring them and elevating them. And Morgan Geekie is the poster boy, along with Pavel Zacha, Hampus Lindholm, players who were not stars where they were, raised their profile as Bruins, and hit a better stride in their career. Mittelstadt is a project for them to try to accomplish a similar thing. They decided they didn't have enough skill. So to me, it's a philosophical trade of Charlie Coyle for Casey Mittelstadt. You're getting a guy who makes about the same amount of money, actually a tad more, has one more year of term as opposed to Coyle, is significantly younger than Coyle. Coyle is at the sort of at the home stretch of his best years, whereas Mittelstadt is at the beginning of his best years. And the Bruins want to do with him what they've done with other players like Zacha, like Geekie, like Hampus Lindholm. And I don't know that it's there with this guy. I don't feel like there's enough strength, speed, anger, panache. There's something there that I'm just waiting for. But I know what they see. They see skill, and they think they've identified a player that they can bring to another level. How they do with Casey Mittelstadt is a huge question because of determining where this team's headed. Because if that's a success, it completely changes the trajectory of the Bruins. If it fails, then they're back to now what do we do? And are they stuck with a couple of years at over $5 million here? I know the cap's going up, so there's more forgiveness for investment mistakes. And how soon? What's their timeline to try to figure this out? Who's the right coach for this guy? There's a lot going into this question here. Can they sign Yoki Haru? What is Mittelstadt going to be? Those are the two biggest questions for me facing the Bruins next year, barring whatever else happens on July 1st.
Right. Yeah. Barring, which could be significant. I mean,
we could
definitely see more as far as signings go, as far as trades go, all that stuff. And the question about Lindholm, like, is based on the cap space, based on their contracts, like Mittelstadt should be the third line center on this team, and Elias Lindholm should be at the very least the second line center on this team. But like Elias Lindholm, everything I've seen out of him, he feels like a third line center to me. He feels like a guy that way too often gets outplayed by the best centers in the league when he's matched up against them. Does not make players better that he's playing with, is not a line driver, is not a guy that is a puck transporter, is not a guy that drives a line, is none of those things. Like he wins battles, he plays hard, he pays attention to defense, he back checks, like he does all that stuff. He still makes mistakes in the defensive zone coverage wise. I've seen that enough this year to say that that's a thing, and it definitely happens to him despite his great defensive reputation. And offensively, there are times he does not finish plays that you really need to if you're going to be a top 6 guy in the NHL. And, doesn't always seem to have great chemistry or be on the same wavelength with the guys that he's playing with. There's just a lot of things this year that I've seen out of him. And I kind of wonder, like, where's the guy that scored 40 goals and 80 points with the Calgary Flames? Where's the guy that has posted bigger offensive numbers in his career? Is he really just slowing down? Is it because he's 28, 29, 30 years old, in that range, and he's just really like fading back from whatever he was in his 20s and is now sort of more of a complimentary player, and we're just not seeing what he used to be able to do because he can't do it anymore? Like, there are so many questions I have about that guy, and I think that, Mick, honestly, is a player that what he does and how he bounces back and how he, responds to this whole year and what he brings next year another full season after one under his belt, sort of a little, bigger presence in that locker room because some guys have gone now. Like, I think the story of Elias Lindholm and what he can bring to the table and how much better he can be is a huge part of this Bruins story for next year and beyond.
I 100% agree with that. And the only reason I didn't want to put him in a prior conversation about this was because I feel like there's sort of an internal resolution going on with Bruins management right now that they're banking, hoping on the idea that Lindholm has been through so much change in his life over the past 18 months or so.
Yep.
And then he came into just a dumpster fire of a situation with the Bruins.
Yep.
That was meant to be a stabilization, a new era with a good quality situation. Instead, it turned out to be a disaster. And it's never been a positive environment for him. It's been a high pressure environment with that big contract and expectations. And he's not that kind of a personality. So they put themselves in a position where this guy had a target on him, a bullseye for attention and what's wrong with this guy kind of on him. And he's never been able to really escape the shadow of it. I think that they're hoping that just getting past this year and for the Bruins doing a complete reset by changing out a lot of their team. And let's face it, we're dealing with, as great as Joe Sacco has done in keeping these guys motivated and putting structure into their game. And it's just, you can see that there's no way they're going to go forward with him as head coach.
No.
I'd love to see him stay. And because he seems like he should be a Tommy McVie lifer. I wish we could vote Joe Sacco the Masterton nominee. I wish we were allowed to do that. Anyway, Elias Lindholm, I'm thinking that his resolution is let's put him on the third line. Let's let him find the foundation and the baseline of his game and what he is, shut down, match up, and be that guy. And then we'll build from there and see where it goes. And let's all just forget for a second what we're paying this guy and just, get his head out from underneath the gun here and just let him play and see where we can build this to. And I think that's the way they're going with this guy. So I sort of feel like I already see him in that role for next season to start with at least. So there's a lot of dynamic and Matt Poitras is about to have a playoffs with the Providence Bruins. And he's a guy that they hope is going to steadily increase. And as he does, there'll be more intrigue in the middle of the rink there. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's hard to know which ones are going north and south.
Yeah, it is. And it's super interesting to me that, speaking of Matt Poitras, that the Bruins have opted for Matt Poitras, Fraser Minton, those guys to stay down in Providence and play out this playoff run with this team that by all imagination, by all everything you hear is a good team, plays hard, like doing the right things. Like there's a good vibe with that P Bruins room and the way that they're going and the season they're having. It's super interesting to me that the Bruins brass decided to keep those young guys with the Providence Bruins and playing that out rather than coming up and getting NHL time and evaluating them here at the NHL level with this group that, at times does not seem to be on the same page fully with each other. And it speaks volumes to me about how they're viewing what's going on with the NHL team and the room there vis-a-vis the AHL team and what's going on there, and that they don't want these young kids to be, in this situation sort of like, and it's similar to why I say I am suspicious of all players drafted and developed by Buffalo, because I think when they get brought up and reared in the NHL in a culture like Buffalo, it screws them up, and it messes with their view of who they are, of what good NHL hockey is, of what you should do to win, of what being a good teammate, like all that stuff is skewed when you're in a bad sort of culture or a losing environment at the NHL level. And I think a lot of NHL management types are very cognizant of that and are very, sensitive to that and want to make sure the young guys are being brought up in the right environment. So it's very telling to me that those guys were down in the AHL. Before we keep going, though, I do want to stop and talk about PrizePicks, Mick. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less down on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It is fun. It is super simple. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. Here are some picks for this week. Alex Ovechkin, more than 17 and a half minutes time on ice. Nathan McKinnon, more than 10 faceoffs won. Marcus Foligno, more than 3.5 hits. I mean, come on, that's a no-brainer, Marcus Foligno. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. PrizePicks now offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey, how about honest to goodness real fight in that game last night? Jeffrey Veal and Dylan McElrath, who is a huge dude. Like, I remember this was in the AHL playoffs. Maybe it was, was it the lockout year? I can't remember. Maybe it was. I don't know, but it was a while. It wasn't the lockout year because it was Pasternak was around. So this is probably maybe 10 years ago, 8, 9, 10 years ago. They sent Pasternak down. It was one of those years they didn't make the playoffs under Claude, and they sent Pasternak down for the AHL playoffs. And I still remember Dylan McElrath ended Pasternak's playoff stint with the P Bruins by absolutely like smashing them against the sideboards with a hit. Pasternak left the game, did not come back. That dude has paid his dues in the AHL. Obviously, VL has as well. That was something. That was what brought some energy and some life to that crowd last night. Was an honest to goodness real fight.
I think the fans really started getting into that fight when they realized that it's a heavyweight fight, but they're gonna keep going.
Yes,
and then they're gonna keep going. And then I started remembering PJ Stock and Stephen Pete, the famous pistol, and switch hands, and it keeps going and going and going. It was just a crazy number of the punch stat.
Mick, let's face it. I give anybody credit that drops the gloves at the NHL level. It takes so much courage to do that. Like it's a tough way to make a living, right? It's a tough part of the job description. But there are a lot of players now that they're looking for that first out to end it. Like as soon as it's a logical time to end it, they just want to pat each other on the shoulder and go to the penalty box. They don't want to prolong it. Those guys, it's something they take pride in, and they don't want to be the one that backs down or lets it end. And that is something to watch.
I think McElrath was a little annoyed at the end because he's established his NHL career. And I think he was kind of like, okay, now I got to fight this guy who the Bruins brought up to fight me. Now I got to fight this guy. So he fights him, and it goes on and on and on. And then when Veal finally had enough, I want to get one more shot in here, then I'll quit too. It was kind of funny, but Veal, we saw him in the room afterwards, and he was so matter of fact. And It's my career. It's what I got to do. We talked about it. I got to come up. I got to add something. This is what I add. Thinking like, wow, this guy's tough as nails. I hope he stays okay.
No, totally. 100%. I mean, you hope that for all those guys. That's a tough way to make a living. But there is something to be said for guys that have accepted roles, that understand their roles. And that's something that all of those players should see, and I think there's room for guys like that on NHL teams that will keep everybody else honest by playing to their role and saying, I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm playing my role. You need to play your role too. And, Sean Thornton, I think, was a guy that was always great at that when he was with the Bruins, is letting people know exactly what he was sacrificing or what he was doing to play his role. And he was doing it the best he could. And he expected everybody else to play whatever role they were best at and what they were assigned to. And I think that's such an important team dynamic to have on any hockey team.
He might be the best teammate I've ever seen at that role, and understanding his responsibility to make himself a better hockey player every time he steps on the ice,
for sure,
while at the same time standing up for his teammates. And, you know, and one time after a game when PJ Axelson scored a goal and he hadn't scored in a while, and I wanted to ask him about a defensive play he made in the game. So I came to him and I felt like he was going to be kind of like, oh, God, I finally score a goal. Now you guys are all going to talk to me. And I came to him and I said, I'm not going to ask you about the goal you scored. And Sean Thornton was in the next locker, pipes up, why the blank not? and I'm like, okay, I got no choice here. Okay, let's talk about the goal. Yeah. And I wanted to get to the other thing because I was really curious as to what he was thinking on a defensive play he made, because PJ should have won a Selke at some point. He was that good. And wingers don't get many. I felt like he was a caliber who should have been considered for that. So yeah, I did. Those are two guys right next to each other, and they couldn't be, more different as far as what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
But the love in that room, the respect in that room, it was so special. It was so great to be around and to understand all over again why a hockey team feels like a family when they're doing the right things.
Yeah, when things are going right, when they pick the right players, when it's the right dynamic, like the right mix, absolutely. Like, and that's why sometimes you see teams like will hang on to that before they probably should to try to keep that going, because it is so special to have that. One interesting thing to note, Mick, from last night's game and that particular opponent, the Washington Capitals, is does seeing the Capitals and seeing how they sort of have turned things around and turned themselves back into one of the powerhouses in the East, does that give you optimism that there is a retooling path for the Bruins, that there is a pathway where they can keep Swayman, Pasternak, McAvoy, Lindholm, maybe a couple other pieces, add some pieces, draft well, make a couple of shrewd trades. Like the Capitals thing, when you break it down and you break down their roster, there was a little bit of everything going on. Dylan Strome was a free agent signing. They traded for Jacob Chikrin, which was an excellent trade. They kept Carlson. They kept Tom Wilson. They kept Ovechkin. They kept, there was a core of 3, 4, 5 guys that they kept. So they've drafted Connor McMichael was a really good draft pick. That kid Protas, phenomenal third-round pick. That 2019 draft where they got Protas and McMichael is going to turn into a very franchise-changing draft, I think, for the Capitals, because they got 2 excellent players out of that one. It's kind of like getting, they got like Marchand and I think Lucic out of the same draft. The Bruins
a decade earlier,
those kind of drafts really changed the fortunes of your franchise. But it wasn't just the draft; it was a resurgent veteran core. It was adding to it with good free agency and good trades, and it kind of shows the pathway that there is a pathway the Bruins have to undergo and trot upon, and they're gonna have to hit home runs and be really good about the moves that they're making now if they want to be that, because that's what happened with Washington. They didn't miss on 4 or 5 things that they did, and it all is teamed up to have them back where they're at their perch in the top of the Metro Division.
I think Protas is really important to this discussion, because every once in a while a team drafts a guy that others may see as kind of like a long shot project. But if they can hit on that guy and develop him, before the Caps were all that in a bag of chips, Peter Laviolette, when he was coaching them and they were really down in the dumps, Backstrom wasn't in the lineup, Kuznetsov was in and out of the lineup. Yep. That was their Bergeron Krejci.
They missed the playoffs that one year.
Right. Yep. And the Bruins 5-gamed them.
Yes.
And when they still had Orlov ending Kevin Miller's career.
Yep.
And
that was one. Remember that ended with Ovechkin screaming at Samsonov on the bench. There was there was an utter mess, an utter implosion you could see happening on the Washington Capitals bench while they were going down.
They were a hot mess, and that was a no-win for Lavi. But it was a situation where they were trying to hang on to the past because they had won it in 2018. Yep. They had been a great team in the NHL for over a decade, but they finally win the Cup in 2018. and they're trying to hang on to it, and it was just falling apart, rotten to the core, and they couldn't hold it together. So, yeah, especially in the context of post Backstrom Kuznetsov, the Bruins post Bergeron Krejci have a path, but you got to find a Protas, you got to find a Tom Wilson, they got Chikrin, the Bruins got Zadorov. The Bruins handed the goaltending crease to Swayman. They got the goalie who used to play for Vegas, and their team, and they got Strome. The Bruins got Elias Lindholm. Who did better? Well, we know in the immediate how, and they also identified a young coach who is, to me, the shoe-in for the Jack Adams.
Yep.
I'm usually not in favor of giving it to the team with the best record.
Yeah.
But
usually it does go to the team with the biggest turnaround, though, right? And they're one of those teams for sure.
It's unbelievable how the Capitals have become so credible in such a short time. And while I'm here, I got to give my shout out to my New Bedford homie, Scotty Allen, who's an assistant. That guy's been beating the bushes of the minor leagues for 3 decades after playing in the ECHL. And then he basically had a slapshot career. And then he goes and this guy he's like about 140 pounds soaking wet, but he'll beat the hell out of you. Yeah. And he's just such a great hockey coach, such a great guy. And I'm so thrilled to see him have a meaningful opportunity in the NHL where he's really part of something special right now. So good for him, good for them to have him. But yeah, a lot of things came together for the Caps. The Bruins, they got to salvage their decisions here. They got to get the best of those decisions, and then they got to continue to find. And obviously, this whole decision by management to embrace the trade deadline as a seller's market and try to have their cake and eat it too, by trading Coyle, Carlo, in addition to the situation with Marchand, and moving on, and then retooling. And then they still get July, and they think they can be a better team next year than they were this year. Well, we sure as hell hope so. But what they really mean is, can we be a better team than we would have been had we not had the disaster? And we had that 23-24 team. They think it was time to move on, and they think that this market presented them that opportunity. I'm not convinced, but it sure is an interesting time to follow the Bruins as they attempt to do this themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, the pieces are in place, right? They've got a slew of draft picks, and they've got some prospects now. They've got some pieces they can use to make some trades if they want to. They've definitely got cap space to go out and spend on players that they identify and they really like. They're going to get a top 10 pick, and it looks like they might even end up with a top 5 pick the way things are going right now as they continue to sink deeper and deeper. So, there's some pretty good centers that are in that draft, center prospects that, could certainly add to that portfolio as well. You can see the pieces, the moving parts involved here coming together, and this coming together pretty quickly and reforming into something good. You can see the possibilities, you know what I mean? They're going to have to hit some home runs. There's going to have to be a 3rd round pick and Nick Jensen for Jacob Chikrin somewhere in there. They're going to have to make a great trade and bring in a player. And obviously they love Chikrin. They just signed him to a massive deal, a contract. They really like that player, and he's having a great year. He's got 20 goals.
Playing like a young Scott Stevens.
Yeah. And he's always had that talent and that potential, and he's still young. He's still only 26, 27, which is young for a defenseman. Yeah. So especially with the game that he plays. So you need in Dylan Strome, they hit on him, and he's been a very good player.
One of those plays like you mentioned, who's Nadinov there. Yeah. Strome made one of those redirects across the goal mouth last night that was really pretty. And he'll probably get a lot more props for it than the Bruins kid will.
Yes, he will. Well, they'll think it was purposeful from Strome. I think who's Nadinov, maybe people think it's an accident, and that's just the way.
Until you do it 15 times in a row.
Yeah, exactly. And just a quick mention too. Ryan Leonard, I was super impressed with last night. I thought he was very good, physical, but also playing away from the puck. You noticed him. Like, he was getting in people's way. He was competing all over the place. He was getting to the front of the net in the offensive zone and paying the price. The go-ahead goal that they scored that really shifted the game, he was first on pucks and winning battles all over the place and retrieving pucks in the offensive zone. He should have had an assist on that goal. And like, it wasn't like he was getting stripped of the puck a lot. You could tell he was trying to do some things with the puck and learning, okay, these guys are all really good defensively, and they were just knocking it away from him. Like, he was having a hard time pulling off some moves that probably worked in college are not going to work at the NHL. But even that part of it aside, he was such a factor in all the different things that were going on that tells you that he's going to be a very successful NHL player. Because really what separates those guys at that level is that stuff away from the puck and those different things, those little details that you can do, in addition to having the offensive skill and making things happen. And he was doing all that last night.
And if you're the top college team in the country and you're the top offensive weapon of the top college team in the country, and you have the puck a lot, and you can take it into the zone yourself and make your own shot when you want to, I feel like it's really hard and challenging for a player like that who has the puck so much and can do so many things at that level to make a transition to when you're playing against these seasoned professionals,
for sure,
who are really, really good at what they do. And he is clearly going to be impactful to the Capitals. So the good team just got better. So exciting times for them.
Yeah, it is. And it's good to see a Massachusetts kid doing well. He's played locally, represents the state, is what's going right with Massachusetts hockey and local hockey. So good on Ryan Leonard. That's a Washington Capitals team that got even better adding him to that group. So it's going to be interesting to watch. All right, Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Everybody else out there, thanks for listening. Let's also thank PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Mick Colageo, thanks for joining us, my friend.
My pleasure, Joe, anytime.
Everybody else out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.